Hello guys, welcome to Online Web Tutor presented by Profotech Solutions team. I am Sanjay. We are learning CodeIgniter Framework Beginners tutorial and this is our part 19. Inside this video session guys, we will discuss more about form validation rules. And also guys, if you're a beginner to this channel, then please don't forget to subscribe and keep watching our previous video sessions to get the clear concept about CodeIgniter Framework tutorial. In our previous video session guys, if you go to editor, now inside this controller, we have made our some validation rules. Form validation is a library. By loading this library, we have methods something called set rules. Inside this set rules, we have set our rules for our input type elements. Here, we have passed three parameters. Firstly, the name attribute of the element, and this is the label name. This is our rule. So inside our previous video, we had discussed about the rule is required. So inside this video session guys, we are going to discuss more about this rule section. So let's say that txt name, if we go to browser, now this is our input type elements that we have made. So inside this name field, if suppose we enter something only 3 characters like ABC, so we want to validate this name field, means we want that at least name should be 6 character, or the maximum length of this name should be, let's say, 20 or 15 characters. So how can we restrict with the length of this name? So back to editor. Now here we have to put, let's say that firstly we are going to implement about the mean length. So just we have to write the pipe symbol, means we are going to use multiple rules for this name element. Okay, so to write multiple rules we need to use called a pipe symbol. So inside this, let's say mean length, we are going to put as 6. It means that minimum length of name element should be 6 characters. So if I save this file, back to browser, reload this page. Now inside this file, if I write something, let's say ABC, and the email address something here, if I press submit, as we can see that the name field must be at least 6 characters in length. This is my system error, so don't worry at all about this error. Now this error actually we got by adding our rule called mean length. So if we back to editor, now let's say that we are going to set our max length also. So let's say max length. Inside this max length, let's say that we want the maximum length of name value should be 10 characters. Means we are not going to allow more than 10 characters inside this name field. So if I save this file, back to browser, reload this page. Now let's say that I'm going to put, let's say, online web tutor and something the email address right here. So as we know that this is more than 10 characters. So if I press submit, we have error, something called the name field cannot exceed 10 characters in length. So we have used guys multiple properties or multiple rules inside this input type element. Now we have a rule to discuss is something called trim. If I back to slide, open a new tab, and if here we have a rule in CodeIgniter something called trim. This is only what basically it is. Let's say that we are going to enter some values inside our name field, and the name field is something, let's say that if go to browser, reload this page once more. Now I'm going to enter some name inside this input type element. So let's say that online web tutor. But let's say that we are just going to make some space at the front. Let's say that here we have some space at the front and also we have some space at the end. So how can we remove these spaces from its front side and from the end side? So this is why actually we can use the trim rule. So back to editor. So if I save it here something called trim, it means that if we have passed multiple spaces before and after our characters, then it will automatically trim out all these things and a proper name will be saved inside our database table. This rule does not give any error messages what we have seen so far with these rules. Now next, let's say about this email condition. Let's say we want that mean length, also we want, let's say, 10 characters. So if I save this file, back to browser, reload this page, and let's say that online. Next we are going to put about the email address. This is more than 10 characters. If I press submit, now the form has been submitted. Why? Because we have put only the mean length. It means that there is no restriction about the max length in this email. Okay, Now we are going to discuss about the next rule. Next rule is about the callback. This is our user defined rule. Let's say that we have inside our database table, we have thousands of email. We have saved all those emails from this form. Now next time, if suppose this is the email address already registered in our database, now in the next entry we are going to again supply this email address. So we want to validate that if this email ID exists already in our database, then in that condition we need to give error messages is that something called email already exists. So how can we do that? So if I back to editor, let's say that to write any user-defined callback function, we need to add as a prefix something called callback underscore. This is the syntax. This is the default syntax that we need to write with any user-defined callback function. Next we need to write the function name. So let's is email exist. Now we need to define this callback function inside this file. So if I copy is email exist, go here and let's say that public function is email exist. Now keep in your mind guys that I have defined only is email exist, not actually what function name we have supplied here. The function name is basically is email exist. This is only the prefix that we have added. This is not actually we can write inside with the callback function here what we have defined. Now inside this function we are going to check our existence of the email address to our database. So let's say value. What will be the value here? So right here, this is the callback function, or this is the rule that we have applied to this input type element called email value. So automatically it will pick the current value. So means this is our email address. So inside that, let's say that inside a valid email, let's say valid emails array. Inside this array, let's say that these are the email address what we are going to supply is exist inside our database table. So let's online@gmail.com, online Web Tutor@gmail.com, and let's say Sanjay@gmail.com. These are the email address basically exist in our database table. Actually, by using a function or inside our model, we can make any function, and by going to that function, we can actually fetch all these data from our database table instead of writing this as a manual. We will do all these things in our upcoming videos. This is for the understanding about the rules and the concept. So let's say that this is an array which basically contains some of the email addresses which already exist in our database table. So how can we compare this value with those values? So let's say that if not empty, it means that firstly we need to check that this field should not be empty, or let's say that if it will be empty, then it means we have to return called the false value. Okay, after getting some value inside this value variable, let's say that if in array, this is a function, basically we are going to pass, let's say value inside this first parameter, second parameter inside here. What basically in array do? In array checks this value inside this array. It means that if the value exists inside this valid emails, it means that we have already registered email address in our database table. Then in that condition, we need to return some of the error messages. So let's say that else, it means that we have no value inside this valid emails array. So after getting this value inside this array, so what we will do? We need to set our error message. So let's say this form validation. Inside this form validation library, we have a function called set message. Inside this set message, we need to pass the function name. So is email exist. Now in the second parameter, we need to pass the error messages. So we want that the, let's say the curly pairs and let's say field. We are going to pick the dynamic, the field name what we have supplied. So here this is our field name. Okay, so the error message something called the field means the email already taken. Try another email ID. This is our error message. So after getting the email address inside this array, the error message actually we will get something called the email already taken, try another email ID. Now in the after message we need to return call false value. Else, if this value does not exist inside our valid emails array, then in that condition we need to return, let's return true value. So if I save this file, go up, let me check that okay, all we have set successfully. Go to browser, reload this page. Now let's say that the name we are going to pass something online, and let's say that this is the email address we have already supplied to our valid emails array. Now if I press submit button, click on submit, the form has been successfully submitted. Why? Because this is the email address we have written. Now this is called online web tutor hub at gmail.com. So if I back to editor, as we can see that online web tutor hub, there is no hub keyword. So that's why the form has been submitted. So if I go back again, reload this page, and let's say that this time we are going to pass the value, and value we are going to, let's say that if I copy this email address, go here, passing it here, this email already exists in our database table or inside our valid emails array. So if I submit that, now as we can see that this is the error message, the email already taken, try another email ID. So this is our custom validation error messages that we have set as a rule inside this txt email field. One more thing guys I need to discuss inside this video session. So let's say that we have 5 rules and we have made 5 different lines. So we can actually make single line and we make a configuration so that all rules should be there. So let's say that I'm going to comment these 2 lines. Okay, and let's say that this is our configuration. Let's say config rules array. Inside this config rules array, we need to pass all these rules what we have discussed inside these individual lines inside this array, so we can make as a separate array. So inside this array, first we need to define this txt name. So firstly the parameter is called field name is something called txt name. So if I copy, pasting it here, the label we have specified called name. So let's say that it should be label. Inside this label we have called name, and finally all the rules what we have supplied here. So if I copy all these rules, go here, and let's say that inside we have third key something called rules. These are the keys guys actually the CodeIgniter provides, and all these rules we have something called txt name, and these are the rules we have supplied here. Now in the next we need to make the emails array as well. So let's say another array. Inside this array, firstly we need to write as a field we have called txt email. So copy that, pasting it here. Another we have something called label, we have called email. So let's say email, and the next we have called rules. Inside this rules we have defined here something called required, min length, and the callback function. So copy that and pasting inside these double quotes. So if I save this file, now finally I'm going to make a line something called this form validation. Let's say set rules. Inside this set rules, what we have seen so far just forget for now. Now inside this set rules I am going to pass this array. So config rules. Inside this config rules all we have defined with the name field and the email field just in a single line. So if I save this file, back here, reload this page. Now if I click on submit button, as we can see that these are the error messages that we have supplied so far. Now here is an error. Error is that unable to access the error message corresponding to your field name, something called is email exist. It means that inside this there is no value. So go to editor. Basically we have made a callback function. So callback function also checking the empty value, and inside this empty value we haven't set any error message. So let's set this form validation. Let's say set message. Inside this set message, the first parameter we need to pass the callback function name. So let's say that is email exist, and also let's say email address is needed. So if I save this file, again back to browser, reload this page, if I click on submit button, now this is our error messages. Also, if I pass the more than 10 characters inside this name field, and also this is our email address, so if I list.com and if I remove hub from here, press submit, these are the error messages that we have supplied. So successfully guys, we have seen about how can we put our validation rules inside all the fields what we have actually passed, like txt name and the txt email. In the next video session guys, we are going to save all these values to our database table, or more fields actually we are going to add inside this form. Right now there is only 2 fields. In our next video we will add some more fields and we will do some more validations. Also we will change our custom messages, because as we have seen so far that CodeIgniter basically provides the defined messages what basically the form validation library have. Now we need to change this message to how can we achieve that. We will do all these configurations in our next video. So inside this video session guys, if you have any query, then please drop your comment. I will give my reply as soon as possible. So for this video session guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day.